Hello and welcome to the channel. Now in today's video I would like to discuss a very fascinating angle in pocket watch archaeology, and this is in relation to hallmarks that we find inside the watches, and these relate to maker's marks, poinçons, is often called marques de fabrique, and I am specifically referring to this is in the context of Swiss watch fabrication during the 19th century. And in general, we have this uniquely Swiss institution of établissage. And the people who were involved in these, making watches that were for sale with the artisan's name, these individuals were called établisseurs. Now, an établisseur under his roof could have a lot of the production. Now, for various specialized endeavors, they did subcontract these tasks to other specialists, and it is there where we see other markings in a pocket watch. For example, case makers, and even in certain situations, movement suppliers. So the établisseur is bringing these pieces together in a unification and signing the watch and selling it on to their customers. They're at the top of the food chain in this situation, in this arrangement. This is sort of a pyramidal scheme that the access to the customer was a very lucrative and tightly held position that not just anyone could sell forward. So these établisseurs had power, but they were essentially fabricating these watches with prefabricated parts in many cases, and regulating them and making them ready for the commercial use and selling. So in the 19th century, we find these hallmarks. These are often merely initials, the maker's initials in the beginning, because prior to the 1880s, we don't see a lot of these poinçons, these maker marks or marque de fabrique. Now, this did, some of the larger producers did have their own stamps, which they put in their watches from the 1860s, clearly, and some before then. However, during this, after the mid-19th century, and we do see the initials of the specialists that were putting their initials, and they were supplying the fabricator with these parts. So we see these initials, and these can be very cryptic, and it is interesting to uncover who these suppliers were to these various companies. Now, there is, for example, one concrete watch I would like to cite at the beginning, and this is a silver pocket watch, a hunter case, and apparently, now this was signed by Swiss Montandon à Traverse. So he was a mountain watchmaker in the Traverse Valley, and we do find in a particular watch of his, this is remarked very close in proximity to the serial number on the inside of the cuvette. So we do see this very interesting, very intriguing UMB, and UMD. Now, who is this? These are initials, and one is in many of these cases necessitated to take guesses. I almost confidently can say that this is most likely a Swiss Montandon Dubois. Now, Dubois was the family alliance name. This was the name of the wife, but this combined name, this is generally shows the alliances. And so I do believe that this was made for Alphonse Montandon by a close relative, very close by in La Chaux du Milieu, and this was Swiss Montandon Dubois. And this seems to be very plausible. Now, his specialty, his genealogical information lists him as horloger, which is a very general term for watchmaker. And in addition, he also had a specialization in pivots. We find this in Davoine almanacs. So he was a pivoteur, but this does not exclude that he would not have been able to do other casework and etc. That many times these masters were basically multitasking, and they had multiple specializations. So I do believe that this is one good example of this. Now, there can be many of these that are very unclear. It is indeed quite difficult to determine who is behind these initials. But there is another very interesting hallmark in a silver watch dating from the late 1850s that was fabricated by or for Montandon Frères Locle, and this is another silver hunter case pocket watch, and on the inside of the lid we do see the hallmark, and this is rather fascinating. These initials do give one a little bit of pause for thinking. We find these EFB initials, EFB, and to my mind, now I do know from correspondence of David Henry Montandon of Locle, who was setting up and establishing Montandon Frères en Locle during the 1830s and 1840s. From his mid-1830s correspondence, he had a lot of work with one of his allied family members. His wife was a Brunt, and this person that is mentioned very extensively in these business correspondence letters, copie de lettres, this was Edward Favre Brunt. And he was indeed even making trips to Besançon in France to collect payment for notes. So he was a highly trusted individual, and he was an allied family member now. So we do have this, and this is rather fascinating. And it's most probable that by this late 1850 period, this is most certain to be Edward Favre Brunt. So we do have that. But many of these initials are highly mysterious and require lots of research. So I will not be spending too much time. I will show a few of them to you here. And obviously these are things that research continues. And it is a little bit of, we're delving into the story of these business relations, and oftentimes this is not clear, but oftentimes we also have a lot of hints from the history, and we know that there were business activities together. So when we see an instance of these initials appearing, and we already know the broader context that there was business contact between these firms, that this solidifies our theory. However, a very interesting revelation has come up in the stride of my broad research on the Montandon watch dynasty. Now, many of these makers are independent makers, and they are outside of the largest firm of watch production, the Montandon Frères Locle, who also operated in Paris, in France. They had Montandon Frères Paris and Rambouillet. But Montandon Frères did operate around Switzerland outside of Locle. They had people in La Chaux-de-Fonds, they had people in Neuchâtel City, and etc. Indeed, Saint-Imier. So we see these people spreading out, and the relationship is not exactly clear, but most likely we do, a pattern is emerging that we do see these individuals were most likely collaborating much more closely than one would suspect. Now, I would like to share with you a very fascinating grouping of poinçons, or these hallmarks, that we find in various different watches by Montandon makers. Now, we do have a very fascinating gold watch signed A Montandon Locle. This is most probably August Montandon. Now, August Montandon did win a honorable mention at the 1881 national show in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and we have him placed there. Now, this Auguste does appear to be Louis Auguste, who was working in Locle with Montandon Frères on Rue de la Côte, which is the epicenter of these Montandon fabricators, all around Montandon Frères Locle. Now, by 1880, we find him in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and this was very. It's not exactly clear the reasons for his locating to La Chaux-de-Fonds. However, we do find him there, and this is Auguste Montandon Perret, so Louis Auguste. He went by Auguste, and he's probably the individual behind our Montandon Locle pieces. And in cases Auguste, we do have what's his son Auguste Montandon. Now there was another Auguste Montandon in Nyon, but he died very suddenly and very violently in 1890 in a terrible accident that occurred in his watch shop, which was an explosion. I'd like to cover that in a video all on its own because it's very fascinating, very tragic, but very fascinating. This was news that was covered in German periodicals, in American periodicals. We find even in Chicago mention of this. We find it in Swiss periodicals, most definitely. But this event did end the life of this Auguste Montandon, who was a watchmaker. He did appear in the 1890 Davoine Almanac. It was the only almanac he was in, but he was in business prior to that in the mid-1880s. And he had a jewelry and watch shop. But this Auguste, we find a very fascinating hallmark. I would like to focus on this hallmark. And this is, we see J, G, and we have this harp in the middle. Now, this trademark was made in 1882, I believe, and it is from the company of Julien Gallet et Compagnie. And this was a La Chaux-de-Fonds based company. It was originally founded in 1826 by Julien Gallet, and that was in Geneva. However, I believe by the 1840s he did relocate or opened up an additionally in La Chaux-de-Fonds. Now he would also operate in the United States, in New York and in Chicago. But this company still functions even today, and it's very fascinating. But we have an A Montandon Locle watch with this mark. Now, there are earlier Montandon pieces from the 1870s from various different signings, including L Montandon Locle, and this is Louis, and this is most probably Louis Frederic Montandon, and he has the J and G signs. And indeed, another one of his watches, there is a very similar, this is an LG in a diamond. Now, this is very possibly the same company because after Julien Gallet died, he died in the middle of the 19th century in 1849. He was replaced by Leon Louis Gallet, who lived up until 1899. So he was running the company, and it's very possible that this is Leon Gallet, this LG. But we continue with this Gallet family, and so we have A Montandon and L Montandon with Julien Gallet providing cases by the hallmarks we find. There is a F Montandon Locle with J equals G, and this must probably be the same Julien Gallet and Company. This was before the trademarked Ponson in 1882. So we do have, and we have to remember that F. Montandon Locle is very clearly been demonstrated to be Frédéric Montandon, who was in Neuchâtel City. However, he was signing Locle because this was a mark of quality. And when one sees these three categories of A. Montandon, L. Montandon, and F. Montandon Locle utilizing the same supplier, the question begs itself: were they merely, was this a mere chance that they were using this company, or were they depending upon or relying upon a supplier that was much more integrated into Montandon furs? And this is a very interesting question. There is a suggestion here now, because we see these similar markings on watches which are not specifically tied to Montandon furs, but yet are sharing this very important supplier. And this was an important company. Indeed, its existence today, almost exactly 200 years later, shows the strength of this company, that they're able to go from generation to generation. And indeed, this family is related to, they have one of the cousins of this Léon Gallet is Jules Racine. And Jules Racine is also located in New York. And indeed, we do have this very interesting crossover. We have a reference from a story that was unfolding in 1861, and this is from a book that's called Maiden Lane, The Story of a Single Street. This is by Albert Ullman, and this is basically history of the street in New York, this Maiden Lane, and he relates a tale, and this is at the very beginning of the Civil War, when the American regiments of New York were marching off to battle. And let me read this. War brings with it many extraordinary experiences, even a touch of humor brightening up occasionally the somber picture. A few reminiscences have fortunately been preserved. No doubt they will be read with an added interest because of the personal element that is connected with them. Charles Perret, formerly of the firm of Jules Racine and Company, entered the employ of the watch importing house of H. Montandon and Co., located in the Gilsey building, southwest corner of Cortlandt Street and Broadway, as a boy in 1861. So this is Charles Perret as a boy in 1861, recalling this. He vividly remembered the commotion caused by the departure of the 7th, the 69th, and other regiments, all of which marched down Broadway between crowds of excited and cheering citizens, and swung into Cortlandt Street on their way to the ferry. On one of these occasions, having no office duties to claim his attention, young Perret climbed the pole on top of the building, disentangled the ropes, and with patriotic enthusiasm ran up the Stars and Stripes. So we have this young boy, this Charles Perret, and it mentions that he was, now this was at the time of this book was written, he would have been working at Jules Racine and Co. And indeed, we do know that around 1900, we have in early 1900s, before World War I, we do know that Charles Perret was a business partner in the company of this Jules Racine and Co. Interestingly, he had worked in the house of H. Montandon and Co. So this is very fascinating, because I do also know that the family of Jules Racine, they also were allied family with the Montandon family. We do have Charles Montandon, who married Adrienne Racine, and they were living in New York. And indeed, on the side of and so Jules Racine is a cousin of this Gallet. And indeed, the widow, I believe it was the widow of Leon Gallet, who was Madeleine Montandon, née Gallet. She married a Montandon, but she was a Gallet, the sister of Leon, would inherit the business as well. She was a part of the executive board. And she had married a Charles Jules Montandon. But anyways, we do have a series of alliances here among these watchmaking families. And we can see how close it is. And so it is very interesting that we have H. Montandon and co. because the identity of this individual is not 100% clear. This may have been a La Chaux de Fonds, H. Montandon, who was actually Charles Henry, or it could have been one of the other ones that were also more closely liaised with Montandon for his local. But there is a suggestion, once again, we can see the nexus of these families coming together. We can see that these Montandon fabricators and these Gallet fabricators, we can see that there's all sorts of collaboration here. When we find these hallmarks in the watches of multiple different of these Montandon watchmakers, which are assumed to be smaller independent makers, and they're probably skirting on the boundaries of being officially inside of Montandon Furs or in being in some form of collaboration with them. But we have very titillizing data coming from this hallmark research that we are finding here. But I'm just very awed by the fact that we have Julien Gallet in multiple different Montandon fabricators from A, L, and F, who are not, if one analyzes only the Davoine almanacs, that they're not specifically known for being in Montandon Furs, but clearly there is a very close cooperation going here. Now, on the theme of these various different makers who appear to be utilizing the same parts supplier, we have this very interesting, it's almost a Frankenstein watch. Now, this is a small lady's watch, by all appearances, and we do have a dial, a movement and dial, and the movement here is signed L. Montandon Locla, and we have the following dust cover, which is signed with a totally different maker, F. Montandon Locla. So we inspect the movement, and the movement is signed Montandon Locla. So this is a very interesting case, and it is not clear. It is not clear whether this was a later attempt to assemble a complete watch out of miscellaneous parts. However, this seems less likely, as these all seem to have been resident in this piece. So now that we are dealing with A, L, and F Montandon Locla pieces, all seemingly to have utilized the same part supplier, which certainly to me suggests a much deeper collaboration. In fact, these are most likely makers that were collaborating extremely closely with Montandon Furs and perhaps in liaison with them. They were probably fabricating at least semi-independently. They probably had rights to fabricate under their own name, but we do have this interesting combination with three different signings, and this is highly suggestive that these watchmaker alliances were all much more closely related than can be surmised only from Davoine almanac entries. But we do know that L. Montandon Locla, there was Louis Frederic Montandon, who was fabricating in Le Brenet, up until the mid 1860s, and by 1868 he had already located himself to Lokla, to Rue de la Côte, in the very same buildings that Montandon first, Lokla, were utilizing. Now F. Montandon, Lokla, this is actually Frédéric Montandon, clerk of Neuchâtel City, and there's no outward sign that he was indeed a part of Montandon first, yet by the fact that we find watches that he is utilizing the same parts makers as the other Montandon makers, this is highly suggestive of this close fabrication between these, and most likely they were cooperating. So this is I just wanted to show this Frankenstein watch, which sort of integrates into this theme with these hallmarks, where we find a unification of these various different makers utilizing a singular case maker. So let us return to our dialogue. This is part of a franchise. This name, this Montandon Lokla, is certainly represents, there was clearly a very tight collaboration going, because when one is fabricating the watches and putting out a name, then there's certainly some levels of agreement happening here, and most probably a tighter cooperation that can be explained. But this is fascinating. We do have this anomaly or link amongst these makers, and this is just one of the reasons why, when we're looking at the bigger picture and we have a selection of a lot of different watches, we are able to get a bigger view of what was behind these makers, the name, the products that they were producing. We're starting to see connections form, and that's very interesting. But there is certainly a nexus, a very powerful nexus of these La Chaux-de-Fonds groups. Racine, who also went to New York, Montandon, who also went to New York, Gallet, who also went to New York. So we have a very fascinating and we have a lot of data coming out of these things. So I highly recommend anybody who is interested in focusing their attention on a brand, or studying concentrating their efforts on a certain direction. I think that hallmarks are clearly, they're very poorly understood. But this is a field which is very ripe for delivering ancillary data for the science of this history that we are delving. So this is a fascinating topic. I wanted to share this with you because this is hallmarks are indeed, this is a direct link with a fabricator that we are able to get more data from the object by their existence, and we should definitely leave no stone unturned when pursuing our questions with regards to filling out the skeleton, when we are delving this history and enriching our knowledge of what was happening at these periods, who was behind this, and we must question motivations, we must question these angles. So this is just a topic that I've been wanting to share, and this was a good time to do it. I want to thank you for your attention, and any feedback would be appreciated as always, and I would like to wish you a very nice day and all the best. Bye-bye.